Thanks for coming to our next iteration of our Tech Talk series. This is on Web3. The goal of this program series is to learn more about an emerging tech topic from innovators in the Reno, Tahoe area. Tonight, we welcome Shuang Chen. She's a Web3 evangelist with Blockchains, Inc. Hi, Swan, welcome.
Thanks for having me. How are you guys?
We have Jack Leske. He's the Director, Product Strategy with Blockchains, Inc. and Incline Village resident. Everybody. And we have Nate Jones. He is a professor at University of Nevada, Reno and TMCC, as well as the founding partner of Sagebrush.Consulting. Thanks for being here, Nate.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm glad you're all here because even defining Web3 is a challenge. To give some context, we can start at the beginning. We have Web 1.0 or the static web, what I remember from the 90s and 2000s. Lots of web pages that you could view. Information was hard to find. Content was created by a few. Then around mid 2000s, some pinpointed as the launch of YouTube as the next iteration of Web 2.0, which had more to do with user content creation, more interaction, and the introduction of social media, the prevalence of smartphones. And that's pretty much where we are today. So Web3 is a possible next iteration of the web. And what I know is that Web3 is built on the blockchain and has many different ideas and components that could be possibilities, including the metaverse, digital autonomous organizations or DAOs, tokens, and decentralization as a main tenet. So before I get over my head, we're going to turn it over to the experts. We'll ask each of them to share for about 10 minutes on what they think is important or what you should know about Web3, and then we'll open it up to discussion. All right, so let's start with Swan. Please lead us off.
So let me share my screen. So this is the first slide. I don't know a thing about this Web 1, 2, 3, and at this point, I'm too afraid to ask. So how many of you feel like that right now? And how many of you felt like basically the reason why you're here is because like you heard about it on the news or like in social media, but you just got snippets of it. So I'm kind of interested in engaging where everybody's at. So like if we can go around the room, each one of us just kind of say like where we like heard about it, what we think it is, and then what like we want out of this kind of like workshop. Like, do you want to know how to get into like DeFi or NFTs or just being in the tech space for it? So we can start from the left.
Sure, what brought you?
I know nothing about any of the things you're talking about. I just saw it.
Perfect. That's great. You're a fresh student. This is amazing.
I work for Blockchains. And
Oh, nice.
What brought you here? What do you know about Web3? I know I don't know enough.
Perfect.
And amen to that. Catherine, what brought you?
I came here to learn, but his introduction 1, 2, 3. I didn't even know there was 1, 2, 3 going on, but I knew about NFTs, so I'm curious about them.
Sure. I'd like to know more about the mechanics of how this works. It's going to be, looks like it's going to be something that we can use as a resource, a financial resource for trade and barter. And it has absolutely no backing by any government or anything else. It's so nebulous that it needs to be refined, possibly regulated. Unfortunately, look out, our federal government will probably come in and try and bring some regulations on it, and then take a piece of the pie. This thing right now is just like a cloud that's floating in the sky. People say that they can trade and barter. It does not feel comfortable.
Perfect. That is great insights. And like, yeah, like it's decentralized. So it's a whole new paradigm. So it's like a whole entire paradigm shift if you think about it. And I just saw something in the chat, future investment ideas from Ramonia. And then let's see what else. Yeah, so that's good to know. Okay, so that's good to know. I'll add that at the very end. Thank you so much for all your feedback. This is good to know where you guys are at, so then I can tailor the presentation. Okay, so let's go on. Let's see here. So the idea is like radical authenticity to where you guys are at. And basically what we're going to talk about is essentially Web3 as a big umbrella, and then what does blockchains do within Web3. So blockchains is a future forward company that's basically operating in the Web3 space, and basically they're trying to do identity on the blockchain. So what's happening right now with younger kids, like if you think about like, you know, your nieces and nephew, your own sons and daughters, they're interacting online. So they're playing Fortnite, they're playing Roblox. So they're essentially uploading their identity online. And there's no way of like basically doing a verification system and a way for you to actually have a verified ID right now. So this is like a whole new frontier that's emerging, and blockchains is kind of like trying to lead that endeavor and being one of the pioneers for it. So as was stated, Web 1 is static websites. So think about GeoCities like way back. GeoCities was like the first stagnant website. You can make, you know, your own web page. You can have like, you know, a GIF, and then you can have like a JPEG image, and then you can have a bunch of text, right? So that's the first one. And then Web 2 is where things could be exchanged. It's social, it's interactive. So instead of it just being a static website, it's actually interactive. So think of Web 1 as like a TV, like basically you just broadcast your information out. Like Web 1 is like, here's my website, here's my shoes, like here's like my photos from this and this. And here's like my blog. So think about like, you know, all those, you know, static pages. And then we moved on to like Web 2, where it's like Facebook and you can interact with each other. It's like Instagram, it's YouTube, it's TikTok. It's basically where creators have more power, so they can become famous without having to like basically go through a middleman, and they can showcase their creation, their art, and also their stores. And then Web3 is like wallet centric. So it utilizes something called like a wallet, and it's a digital wallet. So the most popular one is MetaMask. So out of a show of hands, how many of you guys are familiar with MetaMask?
We got one.
Perfect. So let me go all the way back. So MetaMask is a digital wallet that you can have. So think of it as your bank account that you could have on your browser. And with that, you can have USD as USDC, and you could have something called cryptocurrency. So cryptocurrency, you guys probably heard about it because there's a huge bull run. So it's like Ethereum, Bitcoin, and you can essentially buy this digital currency to buy digital assets and then have like this digital world. So we can go into more of that later, but MetaMask is the most popular wallet. And then one of the most popular stores is OpenSea. So it's kind of like the Amazon of NFTs. And we can talk more about that later if you have questions as well.
The only thing I would add there real quick is USD is US dollar, USDC is US dollar coin.
Yep. So this is like basically the on-ramp evolution, because as you know, everything, like the only thing that's constant is change. So we are at a time where technology is growing exponentially, and the web has to keep up with it, because now we're getting to a point where Web 2 has kind of reached its max, because Instagram and Facebook, a lot of people are kind of like tired of it and they're waiting for the next big thing. So it's kind of the same era of like GeoCities right now. And here's like a diagram of what Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3 is. So Web 1, everybody just kind of views it and just reads from it. Web 2 is like all interconnected. And then Web 3, it's like read and write. And then you get to have ownership. So basically, if you were to buy a digital asset, you actually get to own it. So it's basically creating like a virtual identity of yourself online. And there's a nomenclature called digital twin as well. So we can discuss more of that later. So a good video is this video is like, what is Web3? It's School of Block. It's an amazing video. I'm going to just show you on the clips where it talks mainly about Web3, I feel like this is the best one because this one is very entertaining. It explains Web 1, Web 2, Web 3 very, very well. And he does it with good visualization. So it kind of brings you up to speed. So I have a clip of it here. So that's kind of like an overview of everything. It dabbled on a lot in terms of basically like, you know, NFTs, avatars, and skins. So if I can backtrack a little bit, so DeFi is essentially the new form of banking. So banks, basically, when you take money and put it into a savings account, the bank is actually loaning it out and you're getting a percentage of the interest. So they're loaning it out on a bigger percent of interest, and then you're just getting a minuscule amount. With DeFi, what you do is you take your cryptocurrency or USDC and then put it into a staking farm, and then you earn higher percent of interest. So there was some like crypto.com and also Celsius that kind of went under, but crypto.com has like had at one point 10% AP like APY for like your USDC. So basically your return on just staking your cryptocurrency was a lot higher than the banks. Okay, am I back on the presentation now? Okay, perfect. So, and then NFTs.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Swan.
Oh, yeah, interject if you need to.
Sure. In that case, one of the reasons why those APYs were slightly harder or higher for DeFi protocols is you are removing that middleman. It's the internet of freedom. So in this case, instead of dealing with a centralized institution such as a bank, you are taking it upon yourself to use your own custodial means, your own non-custodial means in this case, to stake it in an automated money market maker, a liquidity pool. You take your USDC, US dollar coin, and put it into some kind of DeFi protocol that has been constructed on the blockchain and is regulated in a certain capacity for, you want to exchange USDC for Ethereum, ETH, and there's a transaction that happens there. In order for 2 ETH to be exchanged for whatever that dollar equivalent is, it has to assure that on the blockchain, this asset is ready to go, this asset is ready to go before there's any kind of swapping on the ledger, and locks that in before that transaction goes through. And for you putting that money into that DeFi protocol, that decentralized finance protocol, you get a reward, that APY, as part of your percentage. So that's where most people have started focusing in primarily initially. I also came to DeFi back in 2017, 16 through investing means. I thought it was just kind of like a stock, something similar in that regard. Not until later did I realize there's entire ecosystems that you can build on top of these, gaming platforms, creator economies, anything that you can do in the financial realm. Absolutely anything in this realm is possible in terms of just being able to take any kind of digital currency, exchanging it for a digital asset, but it's all tracked on a publicly visible, immutable ledger.
Yeah. And the thing about DeFi is there's all these different chains, and there's some that's actually more secure. Like if you do some DeFi protocols of crypto.com, it's a little bit more secure than doing a lot of the ones where people call aping into, such as ones off of like Binance Smart Chain or some of the new farms, because some of the new farms, they'll give you a lot of APY back, like a 400% APY per year, but like it's very risky. Like it could be a rug pull, or the currency could just tank and be worth nothing. So there's various different levels of risk with DeFi. So if you're not financially able, or like basically like in terms of understanding and following up with a lot of these farms and like keeping up to date, it might be too risky. But there's some established DeFi that's a little bit lower APY, like 10%, which is pretty good. And then that basically could be a good place for you to start. And then NFTs was mentioned. So NFTs is digital ownership. So if you think about what's happening right now, if you were to purchase an ebook from Amazon, you can't just loan that ebook like a real book to a friend. So NFTs is going to change that, because if you buy the NFT of a book and get access to a book, you have ownership of that NFT that gives you access to that book. And if you want to loan it to a friend or transfer it to a friend or gift it to a friend, you can actually gift it. So the current paradigm right now is every time you spend on virtual objects, you can't move it and you can't share it, you can't gift it. So all the kids that's currently buying like Fortnite skins, they're buying all these skins and then they have all these excess skins that's not being used right now. And what they can do in the future is essentially have like a Fortnite skin thrift shop and sell these old skins that a lot of the kids don't want to like kind of make back a little bit of money to like buy new skins. So that's the future of what NFTs are going to unlock. Any questions so far?
Yes.
And
Go ahead.
would you mind just, so the folks online can hear as close to this as you can.
You mentioned that there are banks like Celsius, they went under. And if you can explain why, my understanding it was like a big Ponzi scheme. Thank you.
Okay. So the thing is this, I think a lot of it's reckless trading because so leverage, it's kind of basically what caused the financial crash. So nothing's ever constant, everything changes. So the problem is when certain industries and certain groups of people think that forever will crypto go like this, it's not the case. There's always a crypto winter which goes 10x and then a crypto winter which crashes. So they didn't diversify and they had too much leverage to the point that they were in debt. So same thing happened with crypto.com. They were hiring like crazy during the bull run. And then during the crypto winter, they lost like 60% of their net worth, if more, and they had to lay off a lot of people and cut back on a lot of their expenses. So it's essentially poor planning and not having foresight into something that like everybody knew was going to happen. So
I would also add, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jack.
I would also add there's a couple different things that you can speculate on this one, but from my opinion in this case, there were a couple key factors that happened in this case. With the Terra Luna ecosystem, this was an ecosystem that was building its own blockchain network. They had a stable token, what is it called specifically? There's different demographics of stable tokens. USDC, for instance, is one that is based for every dollar in, $1 has to be generated electronically.
So you're probably thinking of algorithmic stablecoin.
Algorithmic stablecoin. And in the case of USDT, not USDT, Luna's version of a stable token, it was algorithmically based. So that way 30% of its supply was built on Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is a fairly volatile asset in the market. So when Bitcoin fell, 30% of the stable token supply or overall treasury supply also dropped, depegging that dollar allotment, losing trillions overnight pretty much in that one aspect. That impacted Celsius immediately, subsequently affecting Voyager as well. And to the concern earlier mentioned by you, sir, regulation is absolutely going to start playing a factor in the future. There's no way around it. We need it in certain aspects. DeFi is great in certain cases, but to Terra Luna's problem, they had a governance model, which basically means you need the community to come together as a whole to vote on an initiative. And in this case, their turnaround time was 2 weeks. They knew within the span of about 2 hours that they had a problem that was going to absolutely destroy their token. But due to being almost too decentralized in this case, there was nothing that they could do for 2 weeks. So in certain aspects, you need certain kinds of thresholds there to keep bumpers in place. So
is it true that everybody who put their money into Celsius, they basically lost money? I mean, they're
potentially. With Voyager and Celsius, from what I understand, if I remember correctly, they're both being acquired by FTX right now. In that process, I imagine there'll be a little bit of reimbursement, but I would not plan on getting any of your money. There are people who put hundreds of millions of dollars into these different staking protocols through these centralized institutions. And because they over leveraged in one direction or another and a stable token collapsed here, Bitcoin's price dropped there, they lost the farm.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it goes back to what traditional finance is. So like basically when you take out a loan, you're taking out a leverage, and that's essentially like, it's always risky. And that's basically what caused a financial crisis, because they were like, oh, homes are always going up. But then there was like a surplus and a lot of foreclosures during the financial crisis. And then homes actually went down. So then everything was over leveraged. So leverage, like, it's good to take out loans for certain things, but like if you're over leveraged to make a lot of money, then like that's a huge risk and you could actually cause a domino effect. So so a good example would be like, say, for example, you had $1,000 and then you leverage $1,000 to take out $10,000 to like basically invest into Bitcoin. If you got in early and it goes 10x, then you got like 100,000. But then if you got in really late and then crypto crashes, then you're down a lot of money and you might not be able to pay back your debt, in which case this is what happened. They weren't able to pay back their debt on the loans that they took out. So then they basically had to like shut down all the withdrawals. So it's an understanding of leverage.
I have another question from the video. There was this, it's not like a philosophical question. There was this implication mentioned that something is verifiable and it has value. The guy in the video said. And that it doesn't quite make sense to me because, you know, the trash is verifiable, but it doesn't have much value. And this kind of applies to NFTs. I mean, you can verify any piece of trash, and why would it have a value?
That's a great question. I think that's a little overzealous on his. So you could assign a value to it, right? You can trade it, you can put it on a blockchain and you can hand it off from here to there, but you still need the supply and demand for it. In the case of the Fortnite skins, that's probably far more applicable in the digital realm of gaming, which is where I come from. Hypothetically, if you were to get a digital skin that no longer is sold and 5 years down the road there's a collector there who wants something from that game, but it's no longer being sold on the primary market through an Epic Games, for instance, but there's an individual who purchased it back in the day and wants to sell that and there's a buyer for it, then it has value. What you can do with just any kind of trash or any kind of NFT at all is you can assign provenance to it and showing that I generated this, you generated that. We can see where it came from and we can validate that on the blockchain. But does that absolutely mean that it has an assigned value to it? Yes or no? Maybe you're not selling it, maybe nobody wants it.
Yeah, so value is a very interesting thing because what is the value of anything? Like, why is a Toyota Honda X price and why is a Ferrari X price when they do the same thing? It's because the value they place on it and then the branding. So if you think about NFTs as more like a trading card, like why are certain trading cards, even though they're just a piece of cardboard, why are certain trading cards worth like, you know, $2 and then other ones are worth like, you know, $1,000? It's the same thing. So basically it's the value that you place on it. And it's also the legacy of it. So value is always a tricky thing because there's a humanness to it. It's just like, why is it that basically, for example, like you go to a store and then one shirt is like $50 and then another shirt is like $500. It's like the name brand. And then there's always a following that basically causes people to be loyal to that brand. And then they'll go and buy it. Like a good example of that is Apple. Like you can just buy a phone, a simple phone. And like the simple iPhone, like a simple like smartphone could be like a couple $100, but then people want to buy the iPhone, which is nearly $1,000. So it's the same thing. It does the same thing. It's like a phone. It calls people. You can find Google Maps on it, but there's certain people that rather prefer the iPhone and then they'll buy a used iPhone or buy a new iPhone. So there's always that kind of secondary market.
So the NFT apply to digital products, and with digital products, you can copy it usually very easily. So I wonder, like if I have something verified that it belongs to me, like let's say, I don't know, a video of some basketball show, and it's freely available online, why would that NFT have value to it, you know? If anybody can freely access it online.
It's a smart contracts. So so basically there's a whole entire backend. So if you think about NFTs, it's kind of like the photo to your like credit card. So the credit card is just a like symbol to your credit account, right? So the NFT is the photo representation to the smart contract, which is what you're buying into. So say, for example, Bored Ape Yacht, which is one of the more popular NFT projects. people can literally take a photo of the Bored Ape yacht and just upload it, but then it's not connected to the smart contract. So say, for example, there's tickets for Eminem, and he's doing like a Bored Ape Fest in New York. The people that have one of the real Bored Apes, they'll be airdropped like another NFT that's like a ticket to the show. So there's functionality behind it. And what people are getting confused on is that JPEG. That JPEG is kind of like a credit card. The credit card doesn't have the value of how much credit you have. It's the credit system. So the NFT is a JPEG image representing the smart contract that you're buying into. Does that help?
A credit card has value. When I get a credit card, they say you've got a limit of 5,000, 25,000. That's the value of that card. That's what I can charge on in hard currency. Who gets $1 when I spend $1 in crypto? Somebody's going to receive that money. Who receives it? How do these guys make money?
This
Because they
case,
make money. They have to.
it's more on a peer-to-peer. Instead of there being a centralized institution, you're going from one individual to another individual, or it could be from an individual to a business. So if you're buying an NFT or a product, it could be a service. It doesn't have to be a picture. You're just exchanging from on a peer-to-peer level. You have,
If I buy Bitcoin,
Mhm.
okay, I give them hard currency and they give me Bitcoins. Okay, who gets the hard currency? I didn't buy anything.
so in this case, every dollar that comes into that system in that currency aspect is either minted or burned on a
Minted into what?
into a digital form. Like most of, even in the traditional banking aspects, a lot of the digital Chase Bank, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, it's not physical tender. It's digital, it's ones and zeros on the back end in that regard. So it's just, in this case, you're moving it from a ledger on a bank-to-bank system to an immutable ledger on a blockchain, showing a transactional history that you can go back in time and review at any point.
What's the difference? Blockchain today with search engines and everything else, you get online, you look at something, and by the end of it, you've got 6 or 8 of the same thing, which is blockchain in its early stages, if I'm not mistaken. Because the blockchain, if you do something, they follow your needs and will expand on that to give you more choices. Am I correct?
I would say that is overall accurate in a lot of ways. I would agree that just like any technology, we're all very young in this. You introduced us as experts, John, and don't get me wrong, we're all still very much learning here. But it's one where there have been stumbling points in the development of this technology. Are all of these NFTs going to have value someday? Probably not. Will all of these blockchains survive in terms of their different use cases as financial instruments, ecosystem drivers in gaming, whatever the utility is that they're building in? Probably not. There will probably be a consolidation point.
I mean, I can see it's used for inventory control.
Absolutely.
Or products.
Supply
I mean,
chain management,
lettuce
anything of that
now,
nature.
Salmonella, it's blockchain.
Mhm.
These products, okay, take them off the shelf. I get that. This currency part.
I can help you with the currency part.
Excuse me, Swan, may I interject for a moment? I do want to get to Nate in his presentation. We're
Okay.
diving
Okay.
right into the
Let's save the
discussion.
question for the Q&A later. Okay, so let me just finish the last bit of it. So basically, it's decentralization in the future, taking back control of their data and their privacy. So we're doing something called decentralized identifiers, which is DIDs. And essentially, here, let me just show this very quick video. It might not, and actually it doesn't play sometimes when I'm on presentation, but DIDs is like a digital license plate. And basically you can use that to basically verify your identity as we go more online and as we upload ourselves to the metaverse, which is another factor of basically Web3 is basically as the kids grow up playing Fortnite, they're going to be so used to gifting and playing with their friends and socializing with their friends online that basically they need a form of identification to verify themselves. And blockchains is creating that wallet right now. And then there's a glossary. So there's a Web3 glossary, which is amazing to learn and basically get all the verbiage. And this is basically me, and that's kind of the end of the presentation. So yeah, so thank you guys for your time. And yeah, I would love to hear Nate, and then we can dive more into all the questions as they come.
Great, thank you, Swan and Jack. All right, next up, we have Nate Jones from Sagebrush Consulting. I'm going to pull up your PowerPoint, Nate.
Okay. Let's just jump right in it. Swan and Jack, you guys did great. That was great. How about that blockchain, you guys? That's some complicated stuff, huh? So, let's preface this: who I am, why I'm talking to you guys about blockchain, and how I'm going to try to see if I can make this all make sense to you. You know, I'm Nate Jones. I have a background in information security. I used to be a penetration tester, and what is that? That's the ethical hacker, right? So it was my job to go into traditional finance systems and try to find holes and patch the holes, and hopefully we all live in a safer world. In about 2016, I had the epiphany, kind of like the aha moment, that man, this blockchain is really more than cryptocurrency. There's kind of an underlying data structure here, and I'll get to that. So I migrated to blockchain, hoping to foresee the up and coming industry. And long story short, it's been a whirlwind from there till now. I ended up teaching blockchain, and I think, as Jack had mentioned, we're all in our infancy. So bear with us here, because, you know, the learners are also the teachers as well. So this is a brand new industry, and it's there's a lot of things to hear. So with that being said, by the way, I taught at, or I teach at UNR and TMCC. And one thing about blockchain, so we're talking about Web3, right? We're talking about Web3. And what is Web3? Blockchain powers Web3. What does that even mean? And so my personal definition of blockchain changes probably every 6 months, is what I like to say. And what does blockchain mean to me? Blockchain is not Bitcoin. Blockchain is not Ethereum. Blockchain is not a specific technology per se. It's a data structure. It's how do you count things? And I think we, in the video earlier that we watched, if you look underneath, it was put on by a company called Ledger or something like that. And I think that particular term is not used enough when we talk about blockchain. Blockchain is a distributed ledger system. It's how do we count things and where do we store them? All right, so hopefully this can kind of give you, I know it's a simple infographic here, but I can try to explain what this means to me and hopefully how this pertains to Web3. So the history of the internet, let's do a little bit of background. Depending upon who you talk to, the internet started out as the DARPA net, or from CERN in Europe. And it was a series of interconnected servers where all the parties were known. You had computers connected throughout the country, throughout the world, of known sets of servers. People communicated with each other, computers communicated with each other through known parties. Okay, so we took that technology and we evolved that into the World Wide Web. And I'm talking about, like, even before the World Wide Web, AOL, CompuServe, Prodigy, all that kind of fun stuff, BBS. I would consider that all encompassing as Web 2.0, probably up until, if anybody's familiar with SSL, Secure Socketed Layer. That was the little lock in your browser that came out, I think, around 1996 or 97, that ensured secure communications between your browser and wherever you're communicating with on the internet. So hopefully at this point, maybe we can visualize that the web is a series of essentially servers that are controlled by entities, right? How do we connect to these servers? What are the rules and regulations? What are the protocols? How do we get that far? That's Web 2.0, loosely connected together with HTML and web pages, right? So now we have this newfangled thing called blockchain. And blockchain is a distributed ledger system. How do we count things? What are the rules and regulations? Or how do we count things? I heard a lot of things we were talking about earlier, NFTs, cryptocurrencies, titles, all kinds of, there's so many things. They're all pieces of data that can be counted utilizing blockchain. So how do we do this in a more cohesive manner? Because the way the internet works today is kind of screwy. It's a big mumbo jumbo of loosely connected servers, right? So what is Web 1.3? It's a series of decentralized servers that empower the internet moving forward. So it's not necessarily what it can do, it's how we are doing that. So what does that actually look like? To kind of give us a frame of reference, precursory old internet. There we go. Like I said, Yahoo, Google, MSN, these are all centralized servers and databases and websites, right? Centralized authorities that used to go to, like, we all used to log into Yahoo Mail at one point in time. That was before Google used to be a thing, right? Google came along and completely dominated Yahoo, and everybody thought that Google was kind of insane at the time. Like, how could you beat an entity like Yahoo? It's such a big entity, it does so many things. How could you compete? Coincidentally, it came through, became one of the standards that we all know what Google is today. So what is Web 2.0? Web 2.0 would be more of a decentralized application, similar to the dApp that we were talking about earlier, but it's a centralized application being distributed amongst the internet. And what does that look like right now? You see on there Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, things like that. These are all Web 2.0 technologies where there are a series of connected, centralized servers that we access as a service, right? And if we can kind of touch on, are there any problems that anybody has heard of with these big, giant, centralized services these days? Perhaps, I don't know, does anybody want to throw anything out there?
Data leaks.
Data leaks. So there's a big, it's a big ugly word that we it's almost a swear word in the IT industry. Do we know what the problem? Why do we have data leaks? It starts with a T.
No.
Fundamental lack of trust in our trust. We cannot trust those who manage all these centralized servers, right? So what are we trying to migrate to? We're trying to migrate to blockchain technologies, decentralized finance, DAOs, blockchain, cryptocurrency, NFTs. How do it's disintermediation? Because we can't trust these trust authorities to manage our data correctly. We have a tool to disintermediate the parties involved to hopefully create a more trustworthy infrastructure, right? So that to me is more of what Web3 is about. It's less about what it's doing and more of the problem that it's solving. So we're not doing anything fundamentally different. Web 1.0, Web 2.0, just basically web pages, HTML pages. We go on the internet, we check them out. We, we're all familiar with how the internet works. The thing with Web 3 is, how do we actually access the data? Disintermediation. Where does it live? Where are the servers, right? And so the big use case that we see with that so far is in blockchain, and blockchain seems to be, and cryptocurrency, I'm sorry, seems to be the biggest, most prominent use case of how to successfully run a trustless network, because you can't trust the two parties. You can't trust the banking system. You can't trust anyone, some party in between. They've distributed the protocol and created a decentralized data structure that, in this particular case, exchanges currency, right? So what other things can we apply that to? So we have this distributed server, landscape. What, how do we count things and what are the rules and regulations of that being? So if you look at, this is kind of a representation of the way I foresee, like the way we are doing the internet right now. You have Instagram, you have Facebook, you have Snapchat, you have all these apps that are managed by some authority of some type. And what this is called siloed data. And in every instance, basically the key, and so in my background from information security, they call this the maintainer to the keys of the kingdom, encryption, all that kind of good stuff. Every so-called competent app or software company should have these types of policies and procedures in place to manage people's data and how you, just how you maintain your app. And it's all siloed. It's all different from, entity to entity. I think one of the most recent problems that we had, if we talk about Twitter, Twitter had a huge leak. And I think it de-anonymized millions of users, including journalists and all kinds of fun stuff. And that is something as a platform, hopefully you should have the expectation of privacy and whatnot. And in fact, there's legal regulations and stuff, and that's a whole different can of worms, but you should have this expectations of privacy on how your data is maintained and how the platform, uses who you are. And unfortunately, because what I want to say, I think as within the last 3 or 4 years, the value of data has now superseded the value of oil as the world's most valuable commodity. Data is a big deal. That's why Elon Musk is trying to own Twitter. That's why Mark Zuckerberg makes so much selling, ad revenues based upon who we are, right? It's all in this siloed data that somebody maintains. And right now, the biggest problem with the way this all works is trust. We can't trust anybody to maintain the data. And what's the best example of that? This is my favorite. I think we all remember this movie. You got Dennis Nerdy. If we remember Jurassic Park, what was the problem in Jurassic Park? He was the maintainer of the infrastructure, all the nodes that maintained the dinosaurs. He was the one that maintained the corporate secrets, the DNA. So the incentive for him to maintain trust and compliance in the corporate structure was too far great for him to sell out. And before you know it, you have dinosaurs running around the park eating everyone, right? So that's the problem right now is in most organizations, or almost in every organization, you have Newman, right? There's Newmans everywhere dealing with your data. And so this is the weakest point. So hopefully with Web3, the goal is to distribute the servers and create a trustless environment to where we can actually have all these new technologies, some like NFTs, cryptocurrencies, decentralized identity, all this kind of stuff, and hopefully not have to trust Newman, right? So any questions so far on that?
Yes, you can. So you've talked a lot about how the data is decentralized, but just the first view, it seems like it would be much safer in a safe than when it's decentralized across everybody's computer. And you kind of didn't explain how it's secured if it's across everybody's computer. And my other question is if there's not too much inefficiency, if all the ledgers are stored on everybody's computers, like it seems like kind of inefficient.
Right. So two things there, right? Okay. First off, so what I heard, it seems like the traditional storage of data would be more secure to have a trust authority to manage the data. And that's how we do it today. So that's part of, my previous background in IT was creating a chain of trust between the client and the server, right? And so there's a whole set of rules and regulations and how to do that. And so is it possible? Yes. Is it precarious? Yes. So it's almost like, it's your chain. You're only as strong as your weakest link. And sometimes the weakest link, you can build everything with 100% competency and efficiency, but it's the people factor in between that you lose that. So what are we trying to do here with Web3? We're trying to enable trust where there wasn't, rather than I want to say limiting or changing things. It's just enabling trust where there wasn't any before. Right.
And Nate, we have a question from Judy Simon.
Okay, Judy.
Yeah, how do you develop that trust, especially when people can just create their own identity and there's data security and we're having this problem in our own community about who to trust and what's the data and what are the facts,
Right.
if that's clear.
It's 100% clear. So, and that's actually, that kind of ties in, because there was one other question that was asked before. That's a two-part thing. One was the inefficiency of the blockchain currently, right? And second, so let's keep that in the back of our mind. And the second one is, how do we enable that trust right now? So right now we're all nerding out. We're having this great conversation about blockchain and distributed ledgers and stuff. And we're like, hey, we have this problem with trust in our data. We have a tool to solve it. And we can all sit together and go, great, man, that sounds good. And then we all will split ways and go home at the end of the day. And it will be just kind of in one ear and out the other. How do you actually get people to participate in a system like that? And so I think this is kind of back to the gentleman that asked a question about where the value of an NFT or cryptocurrency comes from, So how do you build trust and value in a blockchain? And so that was the brilliance of Satoshi Nakamoto and the initial white paper for Bitcoin. You can have a distributed ledger. You can say that there's trustless issues, but how do you get people to willingly participate and create this network? You give them an incentivization mechanism. You say, hey, if you donate your time, money, and resources to this thing called blockchain mining and create this miner infrastructure, we'll give you a little piece of cryptocurrency in return. And so the last 15 years, that incentivization mechanism of getting dissimilar people who really have no idea, what blockchain is, or maybe they do or have ulterior motives or whatnot. It could be, there's all kinds of motivations to come together to prop up a blockchain network. And so for me, the whole aha moment as a security professional, and this is why I migrated into blockchain, it was the psychological shift of moving that incentivization mechanism from the user to be a Newman, to have an incentive to sell the data with bad interest, because there's a lot of incentivization to, from other things, to have the incentive to maintain that data with integrity. So we're going to move into that in a little bit. So blockchain, having this trustless ledger, that why do we not want to actually trust a small group of individuals? Because we can't. We really can't. So you create a distributed system. How do we count things, and what are the rules and regulations of how do we count them? And so with that being said, right, the system that we have right now is highly inefficient. So I heard, that was the other comment that I heard. It sounds like there's an efficiency problem with how do you do this 100%. And so that's the big controversy right now. And with blockchain and cryptocurrency and mining, there's a lot of people who don't know what cryptocurrency is, but they do know it's this big, bad, energy consuming planet burning thing. And so they didn't want any part of it, right? So there's already that preconceived notion that this thing is bad when they actually have no idea what it's actually doing for them. So hopefully the goal of blockchain is to enable and empower individuals to not have to worry about these things. And so my only analogy that I have for today is imagine we have a locomotive, we have a train. When they first came out, they were big, nasty, ugly, coal burning, environment polluting monsters, but they did a job. They enabled transportation and infrastructure throughout the country, and they got things from point A to point B. Nowadays, we have really cool bullet trains from like Elon Musk. We go like 300 miles an hour and use almost no electricity or something. You know, this things get better. So the blockchain and distributed ledger technologies that are on the horizon are significantly better than what's coming out today. And companies like Blockchain Inc. and whatnot, they're helping pioneer those kinds of things. So to say, this, you know, my comment about that, yes, it's kind of not ideal today, but it's getting better, right? So I think I saw another hand. So was that kind of clear? Is there any questions on that?
No questions here in the room, Nate.
I think I saw one more person who had their hand raised on, or is that?
I believe that was Judy, and you
Okay.
spoke to her question.
Sweet. So, okay. So if we see what does blockchain mean to a non-crypto enthusiast who likes technology? It's the enablement of trust. It's the aha moment that I had, like, wow, in order for a hacker to hack a blockchain system, I'm going to have to compromise the entire blockchain and somehow maintain that moving forward, which is next to impossible. If it's good enough to secure our financial system, it's good enough to maintain our data and all that kind of good stuff. So, and also one other point, and this is where we, you know, things can get really kind of murky and we're getting really ahead of ourselves and whatnot. But I heard about maintaining a ledger of everyone's data on everyone's computer, right? So this is where the way that blockchain, you know, not only were we talking about Web 3.0, you know, there's blockchain 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0. So there's different iterations of the blockchain. And the way that hopefully competent architects can develop these things, you don't actually necessarily want to store data on the blockchain. And people who say that you do, it's kind of the really not what you want to do. What is the blockchain? It's a measure of transactions. So, or it's a system of transactions. So there's ways you can architect the blockchain to be much more meaner and leaner, where you don't store data at all on the blockchain, and it's just an encrypted key between two parties. So, and this is called a hybrid blockchain architecture, where you still utilize all the benefits of blockchain, and that's a distributed system, but you still maintain privacy between two parties, kind of like in a traditional app environment. So that's the hybrid system that we have right now, and that's kind of like the best of both worlds. And that's hopefully to address, you know, because like we heard earlier, you're not the only one with the fear of, man, if we decentralize everything, who do we have to maintain it? And I heard earlier too about we were talking about finances and stuff, like self-custodian of your data. Like, there is no FDIC. If you lose your, you know, your account and your keys and whatnot, that's kind of on you at this point in time. So that delegation of trust and liability and authority and whatnot, these are it's just a new world of how we're dealing with our data and who's the maintainer of it moving forward. So if we're following along, and this is you know, there's a lot of layers to the stack. We have Web 1.0, where we started talking to each other. And we had Web 2.0, where we started doing things. And then all of a sudden, this blockchain thing came out. And it was like Satoshi Nakamoto came out with this brilliant paper. And he's like, hey, you know what? I'm going to incentivize all these people with something called Bitcoin. And everyone's going to come together, and they're going to make this giant, amazing network. And it's going to this thing called blockchain is going to, become born, right? So after that, now we have this Web 3.0 where we can utilize technologies like blockchain to help empower the internet moving forward because of the current issues that's with the internet landscape, right? So to me, it's Web 3.0. There's a lot of things that it can do. It's a ledger. It's how do we count things? What are the rules and regulations? But for me, what's the most powerful thing? It's the enablement of trust where there wasn't any previously. Because, my biggest thing, going back to Newman, because I can't trust you to put the data in correctly, and you can't trust me to put the data in correctly. We abstract the transactions, right? So, and that's the beauty. So how do we count things? So right now, blockchain is still in its infancy. We're going around talking about tokens and NFTs and metaverse and all this kind of fun stuff right now. And how do we count things and how do we make it fun, right? So let's go to the next slide real quick. So if this is hopefully kind of like a little bit better overview, like a visualization of what I'm trying to say here. Web 1.0 is a centralized network. We all got online, we got on AOL, dialed into our local server, and that server would relay to the next network, and that was a centralized network, and that's the internet basically, I think, as most people think of it today. So if you look all the way to the right, where it says distributed network, where it says every single node is a independent and server that's connected with each other. That's more symbolic of how Instagram and Facebook and whatnot work today. Each server is a portion of the overall app. So you still have kind of a centralized application, but it's decentralized in the fact that it runs all over the internet. There is no one centralized Instagram or YouTube server. It's kind of here, there, and everywhere, but it all comes together to make YouTube as a service or Instagram as a service or whatnot. So the goal using blockchain technology, hopefully, is like the decentralized network. And that's the center graphic there, the decentralized network, where you have all these nodes, they could be Bitcoin, they could be private blockchain nodes. I'm not quite sure how it's actually going to articulate in the future, but you're abstracting the trust away from Newman into a decentralized server where everyone has a copy of the key, the cryptography, what's being counted, because you can't trust any one central source to maintain that data with reliability, right? So, and that moves on. If we can go to the next slide, trust as a service. We can't trust anything these days. So hopefully using Web.3, we now have trust as a service, and you can go to your MetaMask wallet. You can go to your self-sovereign, your SSI ID, your decentralized ID. You can go to all these things and hopefully trust it, because you can't trust it, right? Because you can't trust all the people in between. It's a decentralized autonomous network. So, and that kind of builds on top of the principles of from my security background of when you build an application. Let's go to the next slide here. They call this really buzzwordy thing. It sounds cool. It's the CIA triad. It's confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? When you build things, you want to have confidentiality in your data. You want to have availability. You don't want to, make this application so obscure that it's actually not usable, right? Usability and integrity. Integrity is the biggest thing. So the first two, availability and confidentiality, have been kind of the primary focus of the way information security has gone thus far. You build something, you try to secure it to the best of your ability, and then you hire somebody and you hand them the keys to the kingdom to maintain the app, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Facebook, whether it's some person there maintains that data integrity. So data integrity to me, now that you have this distributed trustless system, I have a greater trust in the data that's coming in because I can't trust any of the intermediaries. So what does that mean moving forward? Let's go to the next slide. All these really great technologies that we talk about, self-sovereign identity, wallets, cryptocurrency, all this kind of great stuff. Even AI, we hear this thing called AI all the time, machine learn it. My cousin is a professor at UC Merced, and she talks about how she doesn't believe that we can truly have AI because we can't trust anybody to input the data correctly whatsoever. So this is where I got to get on my soapbox and say, hey, let me tell you about blockchain. And so, and that's what it is. There's so much of a distrust in the current, how we collect data. Can you actually, that's the big controversy with AI as it is today. Can you actually trust the giants and their algorithms and whatnot? Because it's really just a bunch of, cool dudes sitting behind the scenes making cool dude decisions. And is that reflective of my, beliefs or anything like that? And it may or may not be. So, and in order to remove the bias, you have to have, in my opinion, you have to have a trustless system like this, built on blockchain, built on a trustless distributed ledger that's built with integrity. That is really cool because at one point in time was brought to life by a cool guy named Satoshi Nakamoto, who brought these concepts in incentivization mechanisms to create a trustless environment. Everyone is now incentivized to keep the data clean rather than be a hacker, right? And that's the cool aha moment that I had. And
I'd like to get to some questions from the audience.
yeah, we're done.
Any last bit? Okay. And
Yep.
just as a quick start, who are your clients at Sagebrush.Consulting? What do you do at Sagebrush?
So at Sagebrush, I also do information security. Sagebrush, we do mid to enterprise level blockchain consulting for architecture for if you wanted to integrate blockchain into your business or business process. So I heard earlier about utilizing business for asset tracking or basically anything that's non-cryptocurrency related and you want to integrate it into your business, we consult. So I'm an IBM business partner. We'll just say right now, blockchain is this really fun and exciting world, but adoption is really slow because it's kind of one of these A before B before C type things. So we have customers. We're working on, at this time, it's basically, we're working on bringing the ideas to life, but more what we're working on, and this is kind of my background, is in compliance. So now that we are counting things, there are, GDPR, data regulation. How do you actually do this in a compliant manner? So what we do at Sagebrush is if you want to integrate blockchain into your business, we look at what you want to do and see how it exactly works. So
great, thank you. We're pretty deep in. Any questions from folks here? And if you do have a question, please come on up front so the folks online can hear you. Yeah, step right up, please.
Yeah, I'm going to be 80 years old any day now. And I confess, for one of the first times, understanding better what my parents went through in the era when they were afraid to get on those airplanes because they were new things. And we think back, well, Michael Crichton, I grew up with Michael and he was a friend of mine. one of the messages of Jurassic Park was, watch out for technology. Very entertaining, but he also had a brain that considered what happens when technology, quote, advances our civilization. And we can think about all the good things that automobiles brought us, planes brought us, televisions brought us, computers brought us, cell phones brought us, but we generally don't think about the negatives that those things impart to our so-called civilized world. And so as I'm sitting here and not understanding what the hell any of you are talking about, really, because I am just ignorant about this, I'm saying to myself, do any of you think about the potential downsides of what you're selling to the world as the new, best, most informed way to make us all have a better life? That's my first question.
Okay, yeah.
That's a very heartfelt question. I love it. So the thing is this, with any technology, there's always a good and bad. It's just like humanity, there's a light and the shadow. So if you think about a knife, like you can use that knife to cut up a steak, or you can use it to stab someone. So like there's social media that came from Web 2 and can use it to promote like your arts and crafts, and then sell your business, and then be able to be like your own freelancer, your own boss. But then there's also the bad side of it where you get addicted to it. So it's just like anything. It's just like the metaverse. Like the metaverse is now allowing people to meet from all corners of the earth. They can maybe meet the love of your life from a different country, and then you connect with that person virtually. So you find love through the metaverse. But then there's the bad side where people get addicted to the metaverse, like people that are addicted to like League of Legends and like World of Warcraft, that they spend majority of their time, that they forget about their real lives. So everything is about like your own vices, I guess. So again, it's just a tool, it's just technology. So it depends on how you use it and what your level of control is.
I would also add that we have a responsibility here to help guide what happens here in the future. To your point, you can mess this up really quick. For us at Blockchains, we have a very strong ethos that's driven in consumer protection. We want to make sure that people have the ability to control and harness their own persistent and portable identity throughout Web 1, 2, 3, whatever we call Web 4 on into the future. Through that, we want to make sure that the user is always at the forefront, always empowered. Can you mess this up in another direction? Absolutely. Those test cases are already out there. You can look at what China does with their decentralized blockchain type system, where they have a reputational based economy. And if you jaywalk across a road, by the time you hit the other side of the street, you already have a fine in your account, and your social demerit has already been tacked, and you can no longer use public transportation for the week. Could we go down that route? Absolutely. That is a fear that we should bear in the back of our minds. We at Blockchains very much believe that we should empower users, so that way they have those tools, they control their reputation, not centralized institutions like Google, Amazon, and Facebook. And also want to make sure that we do work with the local governments, state governments, federal governments, to make sure that that identity that you have, whether it's the utility of going into the finance realm or simply using a train pass, is at your fingertips and in a compliant method within the governance system of the geographical location you live in.
And then I came up here to also add, so I do.
This is Sina, everybody.
Hi, I used to be a librarian. That's how I know John. But technically I'm still a librarian. Everybody at the library takes someone. But I do public policy for blockchains, and spending time in DC, like, so Congress is thinking about this, right? And we look at this and we see what happened during World War II, right? Lists were made, people died because lists were made. A centralized digital identity could contribute to something bad like that. But it also, if set up correctly and not centralized, could contribute to avoiding things like that. And so Congress is, there's been multiple digital identity bills going back and forth through Congress. Nevada Congress people are not necessarily on the forefront of that, but it will be interesting to see where they go with it. They're looking at a lot of studies before they enter the realm of digital identity on blockchain, but Department of Homeland Security, the Fed, you hear Gary Gensler talking about cryptocurrencies and who's going to regulate cryptocurrencies. The most comprehensive bill so far is Senator Lummis from Wyoming and Senator Gillibrand from New York, putting together a framework of what this could look like in the future. And that's kind of the path that it's going to go down in the United States, at least, to try to avoid the negative things from happening from the technology.
Like the centralized vaccination, it's like the card, they know everything you're doing.
So there were some countries that actually use blockchain technology in a decentralized manner to do your vaccination card so that you could prove that you were vaccinated without revealing other things about yourself as well. We did not do that here in Nevada.
With a question, Judy Simon.
Hi, a couple of things. One is, how do you, this is for any of the panelists, how do you see this technology working with our existing institutions, government, health services, social services, that sort of thing? And specifically, probably for Sina and John, is how, libraries have been a reservoir of information, especially government documents and iterations of them. And how do you see blockchain affecting that institution, that is public and academic libraries?
Would you like to take that, Sina, please?
Sure. I was gonna see if anybody else wanted to say something first, but one of the comments, I think, I forget who exactly said it earlier today, when I was listening in the audience, about you buy a book, an ebook, for example, from Amazon. Yeah, and you don't own that. You can't give that to someone. Libraries, if those in the audience are unaware, pay a lot of money for those digital resources, a lot more than like a $20 book. It's much more expensive than that to then be able to lend out to the community. And so a decentralized system, for example, for ebook use would incentivize an author to be able to publish their work and actually get a lot of the profit, if you will, from what is purchased back from that. And then it would allow a library to say, lend that, or an individual to even say, hey, I have 15 books, I've already read them 50 times. I want to donate those digital copies to the library, to a public good. And it would allow that facilitation of that, which we don't have in today's systems.
And how about in other areas of the public? I know the city of Reno has, I believe it was historical records on the blockchain. Where else in the public sphere do you see this technology coming next?
The city of Reno also does marriage certificates on the block, or the Washoe County does marriage certificates on the blockchain. The example they like to use is a couple got married, they went on their cruise, they got to Florida, and their passport did not match their name on their new license, but they hadn't just changed their passport. So they were able to quickly pull up, and the cruise line was able to quickly verify that that certificate was correct and authentic, and then they were able to go on their honeymoon. So there is benefits to that, because you wouldn't normally get a marriage certificate for weeks. They'd send it to you, etc. So there's benefits that way for it. I am very interested to see it in voting. We have in Nevada, we have question 3 on the ballot, which is for ranked choice voting and open primaries. And ranked choice voting would actually work really well in a blockchain environment, to allow us to more securely vote. It wouldn't store your date, your identity and your vote on there so that people could see what that is, but it would cryptographically secure it, saying that yes, this person, a person did vote this way, and that is not tampered. That is an actual vote. So there's, in securing our democracy, there's potential there in voting. And I'm sure Nate has maybe some others that he knows of.
I mean, yeah, thanks, Anna. That's great. As far as government's concerned, this is the most exciting thing to me about blockchain. It's not cryptocurrency. It's not, it's not CryptoKitties or anything like that. It's government accountability, right? It's that double-edged sword that we're going to create, because thus far, like we talk about trust, having government trust and accountability and how they manage their data, there's almost no oversight, right? So there's a huge problem with that. And not only that, but the way that the government maintains the data, there is no really cohesive, congruent data structure. Every city, county, municipality throughout the country does things in a different way, and they use different equipment with different budgets and with different levels of security. And basically anywhere in the government that you have a need to count things and there's a lack of trust, whether it's government resources, we're talking about voting, marriage certificates, all that, driver's licenses, all those kinds of things. Anything that the government is supposed to be responsible for maintaining, at the end of the day, the government works for us. We are the people. This is America, we are of the people, for the people, by the people, all that kind of good stuff, right? The government isn't this entity that's this authoritarian, dictatorship that tells us how we are to maintain our data. If we have a set of rules, everyone ought to play by them in the same manner. So this is, like, as it pertains to government, this is the most exciting thing to me. I think it's the great equalizer. It's the great empowerer. Blockchain doesn't look at race, color, ethnicity, any of that kind of stuff like that, right? If there's certain rules, everyone has to play by them equally, whether you're a government official or not. So, so anywhere in government you have a lack of trust and you can implement accounting of things, that's where I see it. That's to me one of the most exciting things, right?
That does sound like the most exciting. And we're getting close to some government accountability. I think we could all agree on that.
So like in Nevada, COVID funds that were distributed over the last couple of years, they're looking at, there was probably 3.4 billion distributed, and there was probably $1 billion of around 1 billion of fraud.
Yeah.
And that fraud can be prevented by being able to authenticate, because that was unemployment, being able to authenticate the individual that is applying for that unemployment.
But data is as good as the person that's putting in the data.
So to that point real quick, that is something that we have somehow missed in this process. Within blockchain, within all of this ledgering, there's a process called Know Your Customer, which goes through and validates from your driver's license to your face to match you to an identity, the DID that was mentioned earlier, a decentralized identity. And businesses can go through the same kind of process to validate that they are an official business. So when we talk about an official user or a verified user being part of this system, whether they're applicable for COVID release funds or this is their bank accounts, it's a trustless system. But if you establish a foundation of trust in terms of how each person is verified and how businesses are verified within that ecosystem, the application and scalability of blockchain is limitless.
So like John sent me a message and said, hey, this is like in June. Hey, Sina, you guys willing to do this? I'm like, sure. And then like 3 days ago, he's like, do you remember? You're going to come, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, that. So, but I like John trusted me to be able to, get people here and do this thing. but we have a personal relationship. And so we're able to establish that trust. But with technology, you may not trust the technology, but if the technology, let's say I'm transacting, so I see this speaker, it's probably $300, but it was $300. And I know, okay, it's marked at $300, I'm paying $300. This smart contract makes that transaction. I don't have to, I'm trusting that technology to do that, but it's trustless because there's no person on the other side of that. I'm making that connection.
You're hitting on a really important aspect that people far smarter than any one of us individually and even probably cumulatively have been able to solve is there's no standard process that's been implemented yet in either Web 2 or Web 3. A blockchain, all it is a system of protocols that are locking in different smart contracts. If you enable trust, we have to agree on what that foundation of trust is. And until that standard is implemented, so that way I, without knowing you, can sell you something, can interact with you in a trustless system, but with trust, we haven't really moved the ball from Web 2 to Web 3 in terms of what its capability is. It's a great observation.
The problem is what happens when somebody loses trust, because losing trust and gaining it back is a much more difficult situation than what you're dealing with now.
And what you see that with like Lunaterra and what you were mentioning earlier of the issues that have happened with certain types of cryptocurrency and certain exchanges. It makes people very suspicious of the technology.
We already have a system of trust. It's 300 years old. This, thank God we trust. I give this to you, you trust it. Our government is going to take care of it. And I mean, so this, however, has nothing. There's no regulatory system, there's no Federal Reserve, there's nothing except electrons, minuses and O's. And I don't understand how this can be such a trustworthy structure. I mean, I think your cell phone number is going to be more important than your social security number in a few years.
I would already say it is.
And we have a system in place. When I go online to check for a bank, they send me something to my cell phone. And if you don't have a PIN number on your cell phone, you're a fool.
Right.
So we have systems like that already. I mean, they're trying to have a cyber system of trust, which right now is rampant with hacking. My stepson asked years ago, he says, the next war we have, is it going to be nuclear? No, it's going to be with a computer. They're going to hack into our grid or hack into our dams, and they can hack into it now. We have a very poor system of online security right now in some different factors.
I want to answer. This is actually two parts of this answer, in my opinion. So I really love the psychological aspect of this, because we'll go back a little bit further to the previous question. Do we think about the ethics and the psychology of it? I do a lot as a former hacker. This is one of the most interesting things to me, in my opinion, especially how it pertains to trust. So first, there is a way on the technical side. Let's address that first. On the technical side, there is a way to quantify trust, and it's demonstrated in the Bitcoin network. So we're talking about two-factor authentication. We're talking about how do we develop trust in the blockchain. So there is an actual clear-cut way to quantify that right now. So there's all these blockchains that are running around. There's Bitcoin, there's Ethereum, there's all these types of things. They're all sustained by how many nodes that are running it and how many people are incentivized by running the node. So what they call that is the health of the network. The more people who are participating in the network, the harder it is to hack it. So with Bitcoin in particular, that's why it's so energy inefficient. It's because it's so healthy. It would take me as a hacker, I couldn't even fathom this unless there was some kind of a fundamental flaw with it. I'd have to compromise 51% of everything Bitcoin is running simultaneously and maintain that moving forward. And because there are so many people participating in Bitcoin right now, the trust is generated from the mass amounts of incentivization that's created the network, that's propped it up. So that's where the trust and the value comes from. And that's why Bitcoin is such a valuable network. You know, one Bitcoin is worth so much. It's because there's so much lack of trust in the system. The lack of trust in the participants is what creates the trust. So the technical, you know, way to quantify that is there, you can actually do that. So now, with that being said, the other two parts of that are, one of them is blockchain. There's a scope. When you do software architecture, there's a scope of everything. You know, blockchain is a ledger, it's a tool, it counts things. Now, are there ways to manipulate the system as there is, you know, perhaps there's other ways you can falsify input. There's all kinds of things you can probably do to create bad data on the blockchain. That's a completely different discussion for a different day. But yes, we're looking at blockchain as just a measure of counting things in order to enable the trust. So we can quantify that trust, we can count that trust, and there is a formula that supposedly, that this is what investors look at, the health of a network, you know, and that's the vitality of the network. So that's the technical quantification of it. Now, here's where I think it gets really interesting. You're talking about the psychology of trust and how do we actually enable these things. And this is where I think blockchain gets really, really interesting to me, because I clearly, when we talk about the psychology of this, I see like three kinds of people almost whenever they get they get hit with blockchain. There's the A, who is like, man, this is some really cool stuff, I'll be a part of it. There's another type of people who hear that word trust and really latch onto it and say, oh my gosh, we have this lack of trust in our ecosystem, in our society right now. Perhaps this is a tool that we can utilize to enable more trust where there wasn't any, especially now that we have this new digital landscape of all kinds of things going on, right? So there's a lot of people I've heard that latch onto it. Now, the interesting part of the psychology is there are others that I've seen that once they become aware of the kind of they lose the ability to control the situation. They don't like the lack, the newfound, let's see, trustless system that it portrays. And the only way I can try to explain this the best way I can is it's like the man behind the curtain effect. There's like a wizard of, everyone has their Wizard of Oz. And when you force people to be transparent in their transactions, it's a new way of thinking that they're not used to, because everyone, you know, this is a ledger, this is a record. This is the third time in history we've changed the way that people record things. The first one, we etched it in stone, single entry ledger accounting. Second was in the 1700s with double entry ledger accounting. And this is the triple entry, you know, distributed accounting. How to count things in a distributed manner where we don't trust the intermediaries. And so I know as it pertains to documentaries and films and whatnot, I think they call this like the Hawthorne effect. And this is way out of my league. But as if a participant is known to be viewed, they may act differently. So the psychology of what blockchain, this is kind of my thing, is implementing, and at the end of the day is, I think, very profound, because people are going from this environment where they're used to being able to write their own book at the end of the day to this trustless environment where the transactions of things that are going on are beyond their control. And it is fundamentally scary. So back to and by the way, I that's pretty cool. You knew Michael Crichton and Jurassic. I love reading those books. They're very intelligent man. He actually knew his stuff. I know, like, he actually put bits of DNA code in the book and everything like that. So back to, you know, the psychology of what the implications of this. It's very profound. You know, you're implementing trust in areas where there previously, you know, weren't any, and there wasn't a tool for that. Now we have that tool. So this is some really powerful stuff, in my opinion.
And folks, we're getting a little bit late here. We're already 15 minutes past, so I'd like to wrap it up soon. Take us out. Cena,
30 seconds.
please.
Okay, number one, Wells Fargo. Who uses Wells Fargo? Wells Fargo uses an internal centralized stable coin to account for their transaction and has for the last 2 to 3 years. That's using blockchain technology in a centralized way, not decentralized. So they're already using that technology. Number two.
How can they use blockchain in centralized way? I mean, it goes against.
Because they're the only ones running the nodes. So then we have the phone numbers, and phone numbers are very important. They're especially important because when you look at your identity and you have your phone number, that phone number you used to not be able to take with you. There was actually a law on the books in the federal government, and you could not port your phone number from Verizon to say to AT&T. You can now because federal regulation was passed to allow you to do so. That's what we're looking at with decentralized identity is right now Facebook or Meta or Amazon or Google owns your identity. They own that data. And we want to see the federal government recognize the ability for you to take that with you to other platforms that you go to.
Thank you, Sina. Jack, any parting thoughts?
No, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for having us. It's going to be absolutely groundbreaking and revolutionary as we continue to pioneer forward in this infantile industry, and we're all learning together. So no dumb questions. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Swan, do you have anything to take us out on?
Yeah, I just want to end up with the final answer kind of to the question that was kind of interrupted. The dollar is actually based off of trust. And if you think about crypto, like you asked how you can buy Bitcoin, it has value. Think of it as stocks. So if Amazon started way early, it was like cents, same as Bitcoin. It was like cents. And then as it grew in popularity and more people bought in, there was a scarcity of how many they are. So there's only 21 million Bitcoin that could be mined. So that's why it brings up the value of it, because more people want it. And then there's only so few of stocks. Same from Amazon, like why the Amazon stocks went up. So hopefully that kind of answers your question, also brings into the idea of trust and value a little bit more. Overall, I really enjoyed this. I loved all the questions. This was a learning experience for me as to how to simplify certain things and also how to basically communicate something so technical into a simplified manner. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Swan. And Nate, a parting thought?
Yeah, I just want to say this was great. I every time we talk about Web3 blockchains, it means different things to different people. And this is the science, art, psychology, whatever of how do we count things. It's a brave new world with technology. And I really appreciate the insight that we had with the audience tonight. And this is you guys were great. Let's just put it that way. This is wonderful. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Nate.
Yeah.
Thank you, Swan, Jack, and Sina. You're very generous with your time and expertise. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you folks for hanging out with us.